Here come people. I gotta center my Che Guevara clock. So sick. Hey, the prince is dead. No. Good night, sweet prince. We need a Thomas Sankara poster. You're right. Now I'd put it right next to Che, my two favorites. Brazil loves you, and I love Brazil. I love the proletariat of Brazil. Bolsonaro can bite me. How do I radicalize my lib friends, Ed? I would say, it depends on the individual that you're talking to. Yeah. I love your YouTube videos. Thank you. YouTube.com/MidwesternMarks. Can you say Afghanistan? Afghanistan? It's hard for me, but I've now learned that Afghanistan is not the right way to say it. Afghanistan. I've heard that there's quite a few Afghani Marxists who like follow my TikTok and who know who I am. So that is very, very, very cool to me. I just bought a Lenin shirt. So happy. That's sick. I have my Lenin coin right here. I use this as like a bookmark. DMX died? No. That's sad. That's really sad. I am an Afghani. Oh, very cool. Hello, then. That's me. Well, that's awesome. I am. Well, there's some in here. Very, very, very cool. I just saw that video of the guy saying that Afghan opium doesn't contribute to the opioid crisis in the U.S. because the opium is sold illegally. Oh, thank you for the stickers. And then that guy who said he knew me, and I've never met him in my life. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, watch the 2 videos ago. He's like, I've talked to Eddie before, and he just lies. And I don't know who that person is. I've never met them in my life, I don't think. And then they were saying, like, the U.S. pharmaceutical companies can only buy from certain places that are licensed to manufacture opium. It's like, yeah, but Afghanistan's opium is sold illicitly, and something like 90% of opium on the world market is purchased illicitly. And it's the same as Bolivia with the coca leaves. Billions of dollars in cocaine get snorted, but the coca leaves, which is turned into cocaine, is grown in Bolivia, but they don't turn it into cocaine. They just sell it to whatever global market, and then they're like, whatever happens with it, right? But it's part of our economy, and then it gets refined in Japan, and then like narcotics traffickers bring it to the U.S. It's a very similar situation with opium, except for you have like these U.S. military bases, which have been there for so long. You can have actual like officers in the U.S. military who run these bases like a feudal colony, basically, and sell the opium however they want. And a lot of this information you can find online, but to be honest, a lot of this information was told to me by people who have spent a lot of time there. So, very interesting. Critiques of Cuba. Modern Cuba or like Cuba throughout history? I would say they could have diversified their, a little too much about illicit substances. Ha ha ha. Cuba probably could have diversified more. I don't know. It's hard. They did a good job in Cuba. Some people would criticize that Cuba's opening themselves up to a lot of private investment right now, but like, you have to do things to get around the U.S. blockade. Like, it is economic warfare, and socialist governments have to do things to operate within global capitalism without letting the U.S. just use the military and embargo to starve them out. And that's what Cuba's trying to do, but they're committed to building socialism still. Cuba's never said, we are a capitalist country right now. Yo, Eddie, do you listen to rock? Yeah, I listen to, like, everything. Can you be religious and communist, Eddie? Absolutely, my friend. This is a good book. Jesus Christ Liberator. So, most of the early communists like Marx and Lenin and Engels were fairly anti-religion, but that was one of the biggest failures of 21st or 20th century socialism, was this like anti-religious atheistic sentiment. People like religion, and actually the teachings of like Jesus and the gospel or Catholic social teaching and ethics match up really, really well with socialism. So there's a really long history of liberation theology, this idea of like synthesizing the Bible with Marx, basically. It's very cool. Who's the guy behind? I don't know. Love your videos. Any podcast suggestions? Rev Left Radio, Red Menace, and then Hakeem or Ugopnik on YouTube. Very, very good. Do you know much about Scottish politics? Little to nothing. Book collection video, please. I have one, and the post-leftists got mad at me for flexing all my books. The U.S. is planning on sending 2 ships into the Black Sea. Crazy. When are you going to stream on Twitch again? Whenever Matt and I get bored and we have time. I always enjoy your content. Eloquently put intelligent statements. Thank you. I'm glad you've noticed my eloquence. Favorite anime? Hunter x Hunter. That right there is me with all the Hunter x Hunter characters. Favorite character in Hunter x Hunter? Hisoka. Thoughts on Rage Against the Machine? I love them. I have a t-shirt that I usually wear to protest, or to any political organizing thing. Can you call yourself a leftist if you don't read theory? Yes. I mean, you should try and teach yourself the basics. Like, it's going to help you. The more you learn, the more you're going to be able to talk to people about it, and feel confident talking to people about it. And there are lots of videos like the ones on my YouTube channel, Midwestern Marks, that break down theory for people who maybe have ADHD or who struggle to sit down and read these complex books. But yeah, it's good for you, but definitely not like a necessity. Thoughts on Yugoslavia? NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia was really bad. I don't know enough though. Like, some people will straight up like support Milosevic, but a lot of leftists are like, no, all the genocidal stuff that they accuse Milosevic of, the Yugoslav president, is true. But also NATO bombing Yugoslavia didn't help, and obviously it was for economic reasons, not for human rights. And the IMF and the World Bank were heavily involved in Yugoslavia for years before that, trying to debt trap them and screw them over in any way that they could. So, how do I learn about socialist countries from unbiased sources, and how do I know the truth? Books. Books are what you need. Books by Vijay Prashad, books by Michael Parenti, and books by people from the global south. Like, that is the main thing you need, because the perspective that those countries have is much, much different than that of the U.S. And if you read what those thinkers from those countries have to say, you can give yourself a much more global perspective on what socialism has meant and what actually existing socialism has been in the world. Thank you for the sticker earlier, by the way. Epic Chungus moment. DMX passed away. I heard that. That's so sad. DMX was, I used one of his songs, Where the Hood At, is like a walkout song in wrestling. Like, when you walk out to go wrestle, a song plays. I listened to DMX because it was hype. So, Ronald Reagan shared my live? That's not good. Are we going to get a bunch of libertarians in here soon? R.I.P. DMX, for real. I'm sad. Thoughts on the Soviet-Afghan invasion? It wasn't imperialism, but they stayed there too long. And overall, the Soviet Union spent way too much money on their military getting involved in other places around the world, which, the U.S. was supporting the Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden, who would later become the Taliban, I believe. The Mujahideen would morph into these other, like, much worse extremist groups, and that's who the U.S. was backing, and the Soviets were backing the Marxist government who was trying to take power in Afghanistan. And if that Marxist government had been successful, I'm sure Afghanistan would be in a much better situation today, rather than being occupied by the U.S. and being kept in poverty as essentially a neo-colony, with their main export being opium, which is turned into heroin. But I'll give you stickers if you say capitalism is based. I would never. I'll never go back. I would never give up my beliefs for money. That's what I was trying to think. Tanky? Well, thank you very much. Eddie, I'm a satire account. I figured. I was just messing with you. Thank you for sharing the live. Eddie, do a little dab. Just a little dab. Just a little one to this side, to the right. How about the old switcheroo? Didn't see that one coming, did ya? Happy birthday. Thank you. Did you know Prince Philip died? No, that's much better than DMX dying. Eddie, come hang with me, Dane, Kirk, and Brent tomorrow. I think I'm planning on it. Kirk invited me. It is my birthday. Someone was messaging me on TikTok yesterday like, you need to respond to me. Like, you are too dumb to come up with a response to my arguments. And I was like out having drinks with my friends. I'm like, go outside. You should do a meet and greet. That would be super fun. One day. Thoughts on the CPC? I have a lot of thoughts on the CPC. The U.S. shouldn't overthrow them. That's my main one. Thoughts on the Russian Federation? Oh, Dawson's in here. What's up, dude? I'm going to make you a moderator, Dawson. You don't have to do anything, but if you see people who are annoying, you can kick them. The Russian Federation is, like, obviously the situation in Russia, you have, people are very socially conservative, right? And there's very anti-LGBTQ, which is no good. But, you know, as I did a video on today, something like 69% of Russians wish to return to the USSR. The collapse of the USSR was an absolute disaster for the country, which is why the population decreased 10%. You had people fleeing and you had people dying. It was an absolute disaster, economic collapse, and people want to go back to the Soviet Union. So Putin and the Russian government have begun a process of nationalizing more industry and going more towards that Soviet model. But they're not like a socialist country, right? It's not like critical support for Putin. It's like, this is what Russia's doing and analyze it, right? It's not like they're moving towards socialism. It's not like you can look at Russia and be like, woohoo, this is great for socialism, just because they're teaming up with China or because they're trying to trade with Assad in Syria. I don't know. Yeah, Russia's heavily involved in a lot of affairs around the world. So, but Alexei Navalny is not the answer, right? It's one of these situations where it's like, you have Navalny and Putin, who I would both say are like bad, I guess. It's kind of weird to just throw that label on leaders, you know, in a complex situation. But, yeah, it's good to understand what Russia is and not jump on the train that a lot of liberals have done and been like, yeah, Navalny's the best, because Navalny is like more xenophobic, or like super xenophobic towards Muslim people especially, super far right, basically a US-backed sort of puppet type guy there. But Putin's not very good either, but Putin is moving towards more nationalization to try and create more stability economically, and the Russian Federation is part of this alliance of countries, sort of China, Iran, Venezuela, a lot of countries in the global south, and Russia, who are kind of forming a counter-hegemony to the U.S. globally. Dang, we lost a lot of viewers while I was talking about that. That must have been boring. What the heck, Dawson? Thank you for the stickers. Why don't you move to a socialist country? Don't tempt me. Maoist arc when? I've always been a big fan of Mao. Like, I haven't read as much Mao as I've read Lenin and Marx and Engels and the other ones, but I've read Mao, and like Mao helped me first understand dialectics with his book On Contradiction. So people who call themselves like Maoists explicitly, I think are nowadays mostly seem like kind of ultra leftists. Oops, my finger slipped and I muted an annoying person. Good. There are a lot of annoying people who find my lives. Not most of you, though. Most of you are cool. Yeah, I think everyone should read Mao, but it seems like people who call themselves Maoists now are like kind of ultras. Like, there was a guy who I used to like quite a bit who called himself a Maoist who, I think he's from Ireland. He called Cuba a sugar plantation of the USSR. It's like, that is such an, and you know, he's like, Cuba's not socialist at all, blah, blah, blah. They didn't follow the principles of Mao. And it's like, Cuba's still socialist, even if they're not like Maoist, you know, and I think Cuba still deserves any socialist critical support, especially if you live in the West. And it's racist to call them a sugar plantation of the USSR. So some Maoists kind of act like ultras, but I think every single person should read Mao. Paul Morin is right. No, he's not. I'll fight you about this. Thoughts on post-leftism? It makes my brain hurt. My best critique of post-leftist... So, like, obviously I'm not a post-leftist. I'm a pretty optimistic guy. I think we can escape capital. And, like, I like the idea of, you know, thinking outside the box and using more unconventional methods that post-leftists talk about. But a lot of it just seems like hogwash. Like, we just need to organize the masses. And when I read about Bolivia and the movement towards socialism that's been happening in the 21st century, or when you read New Moles of the Latin American Left, which is about a similar thing, there are tons of countries moving towards socialism and away from neoliberalism. And like to think that we'll never escape capital, I think is like crazy. Like there are countries that are building socialism right now as we speak, and then you have people in the US who are like, we'll never do anything. It's like, yeah, we can. Maoists are right. That's fine. We can have that debate. People who are Maoists are definitely not like, you know, like that Paul Morin guy I was talking about, who made that take I don't like. I still like him. I still follow him. He has good takes. It's all right for us to disagree with each other on the left and not split into a million factions and never work together. Debunk ECP. Comrade Sparkles, you're a moderator too. You don't have to do anything. Carlos, my co-editor, is calling me right now. He knows I'm on a live. Debunk the ECP. The ECP says that we can't calculate prices and determine how things should be produced without markets, because we can't say, hey, humans need food, water, and shelter and communication first, so those things should be produced first. We can't put all the homeless people in the empty homes, even though there's more empty homes than homeless people. Eventually, Ludwig von Mises will come down from heaven, and he will start throwing ECP bombs at every socialist country, and it'll be like, economic collapse, and the socialist countries will be like, we can actually determine what prices should be and how production should be allocated using supercomputers now. Supercomputers which can calculate the entire Soviet Union's economy in 7 minutes. So the ECP isn't really relevant. And Ludwig von Mises will go, no, you can't debunk. Thoughts on Stalin? Thoughts on Stalin? Better than U.S. presidents. Whoops. Socialism is a temporary means of production. Thoughts? I don't understand. Eddie, there's a YouTube channel called M News, and I think it's China or U.S. propaganda. Well, it's probably not both. I can check it out for you. M News. I can look at that. If a government was communist, how would we motivate people to work harder than others? For me, that is like the silliest question. I mean, not to call you silly, it's a good question. But like, I grew up in wrestling, and wrestling is one of these sports where there's no economic incentive. Like, in order to get paid in wrestling, you have to be one of the 3 best wrestlers in the entire country. And then if you're number 3, you get $900 a month for like a short period of time while you're training for the Olympics. And then if you win an Olympic medal, you get some money. But people are super, super motivated just because of, 1, the joy of winning, and then 2, the camaraderie of having a team, right? That's so, you know, you encourage each other and you create what's called a good team culture where everybody wants to work hard for the good of the group. And it's not easy to build that. But it is possible, right? Like, money is not the only incentive humans have. And when some of my teammates have asked me about this, like, won't people be lazy if they just have the basic necessities? You know, and most of the people who ask this are people with supportive parents, right? So I'm like, oh, because you grew up in a household where your parents provided food, shelter, water, and medical care, did that make you lazy and less likely to succeed? Or did that make you more likely to succeed and more prepared to enter the world and, you know, use your talents to... Under capitalism, it's use your talents to make money, but hopefully under socialism, the idea is everyone would be using their talents to benefit the group. You know, if you have a passion for science, you can grow up having food, shelter, and all these other things, and you can pursue a career in science. This doesn't mean people won't work crappy jobs, you know, but also the average American works 12.5 hours a week, right? That's how much time they spend actually working, whereas they spend 40 hours a week plus at the office. So a lot of our jobs can be automated away. But what happens when jobs get automated away under capitalism? People become unemployed. Walmart no longer needs to hire as many cashiers. But under socialism, if we had a jobs guarantee, we could automate a lot of, you know, worthless jobs away, and it wouldn't hurt anyone. So we could have the means of production doing a lot of this work for us, which is, you know, what we should have been doing a long time ago. Like, part of Marxism, and thank you for the sticker, by the way, part of Marxism is increasing the productive forces. So there are a lot of countries that still would need to do that, right? In Africa and Latin America, the Middle East, even in the East, they need to increase their productive forces so that they can sustain themselves, make enough food, shelter, and clean enough water for people to survive. In the US, our productive forces are already insane. Like, we have so much production to the point, and although we do need to bring back a lot of manufacturing. We've outsourced a lot of those jobs. But we have so many productive forces that it's pushing people out of their jobs, right? We have this crisis of automation. And the way to solve that is to have people own the means of production so that the means of production can work for us rather than pushing us into unemployment, because that's how the system's built. What's your opinion on George Galloway? I like him a lot. I do. I like his analysis. I think he's a kind of a transphobe, which obviously I disagree with him, and if I ever interviewed him, I would bring that up and press him on it. But do you plan on going on Paul Moran's show? I totally would. Thoughts on Hasanabi? He's awesome. Thoughts on Prince Philip? I don't care about the stupid royal family. They're a fake job. It's basically the same as like the Kardashians in the U.S. Are you a fan of Zizek? Kind of. Zizek's geopolitical analysis is very lame, very Western-centric, but his, he's a brilliant philosopher. There's a lot to take from Zizek. So, Eddie is the only reason I'm still on this app. Wow, thank you. Yeah, this app can get depressing. I'm just recently learning to the level of discourse I feel like on this app is so low that like when I see some of the response videos to mine or some of the comments I get, I'm like, ha. Like, these people need years of, like, educating them out of their propagandized U.S. mindsets, but I only have 60 seconds here. Like, it's frustrating, but it is what it is. Eddie, your TikTok about the Sandinistas was one of the key things that pushed me left. Thank you. And that is... I tell this to my buddy Carlos all the time. The Sandinistas are like the argument for like why countries in the global south need to see state power, right? Because there are these three factions of the Sandinistas. You know, some of them wanted to move in a more decentralized direction and hand over the factories to the workers on day one. But then there was a faction of the Sandinistas who said, no, the U.S. and the reactionaries here in Nicaragua are going to try and kill us soon. So we need to militarize and centralize to protect ourselves. And that's what they did. And the U.S. started selling cocaine through Rick Ross in Los Angeles, flooding black neighborhoods here in the U.S. with drugs in order to fund the Contras, these far-right paramilitary groups who would massacre people in Nicaragua with the effort of destabilizing and overthrowing the Sandinistas. But because the Sandinistas did centralize and they did militarize, they were able to fight back against the U.S., and now they have, a moderately successful socialist experiment that Joe Biden's Secretary of State has multiple times threatened to overthrow on Twitter, because the Biden administration's foreign policy is so much better than Trump's. Threatening other countries on Twitter is it's something only a madman like Trump would do. Never a respectable Democrat would do such a thing. Did you talk about Amazon killing the union effort? I didn't. It made me sad. I just saw that yesterday. But it just, my buddy who's big on union stuff and is in the union was telling me, in the rail union was like, this just shows that people don't see unionization yet as the main way to improve their lives. Some people look at progressive politics, but most people are just disillusioned entirely, right? And that anti-union propaganda is still with people. We're like, no, we need Amazon to make more money so we get paid more, and a union will stop them from making as much money. It's like, no, you work for the richest man in the world. They're raking in billions and billions of profit while paying you guys $15 an hour. A union would just distribute more of that money to the bottom, the people who actually, whose labor actually creates all that wealth that Bezos is sitting on. But we're moving in the right direction, so. Thoughts on people thinking China's behind the Myanmar coup? The government who took power is not super friendly to China, and that military has been in charge forever in Myanmar. It was the hidden hand controlling the country, and they just now officially took power, basically the MAGA taking over the Biden. There might be connections to China. The world's complicated, and obviously with globalization, there's all these connections, especially with China's Belt Road Initiative. China has connections to Duterte, who's definitely not a communist and definitely not a great guy. So there might be connections there, but it's much more than just China is controlling Myanmar now. U.S. is behind Myanmar? Could be. Happy Thatcher anniversary, everyone. Yeah! Everyone, make sure to check out Margaret Thatcher's grave, our favorite gender-neutral bathroom. What is a good source to get information on the CPC? You should follow Chinese state media, just to see what they're saying, and obviously understand it's state media. They're not going to publish a bunch of negative stuff about the country unless it's self-critique. But then read Xi Jinping's book, too, The Governance of China. And those are how you can get to, you can get sources, directly from China, see what Chinese people are saying. And then, everyone's going to see Western media, right? Everyone's going to be exposed, if you live in the U.S. or Western country, to anti-China propaganda. So you're going to see that. And then I would follow Dr. Asatar Bear. I would follow Bay Area 415, who I'm having a podcast with about China on April 17th, the day of the Ben Askren Jake Paul fight. I really want everyone to follow Dr. Asatar Bear. Thoughts on Dengist revisionism? I can talk about it a little bit. Someone put Asatar Bayer's name Asatar Bear. Sorry, I did a podcast with him in the chat. I don't know how to type stuff. Thank you for the stickers. But Dr. Asatar Bear is a China expert, and he's been doing a lot on it. Consortium News is really good. CONSORTIUM News. Consortium. They're great. A lot of academics there publishing stuff about China constantly. Vijay Prashad is great. The Chow Collective is great. Trying to think. I like Gray Zone too. I still like Gray Zone, even though I've taken a lot of heat from associating myself with them. They do good stuff. It's not as good as you can get. It's not as good as Chinese. Oh, Ian Goodrum. Yes, follow Ian Goodrum on Twitter. IANGOODRUM. He lives in Beijing, and he's a journalist who speaks really good English. He has all this stuff about the Belt Road Initiative, all this stuff about Xinjiang, all this stuff about Hong Kong, all this stuff about Taiwan, all this stuff about Tibet, all the hot button issues. Eddie, explain why American imperialism is bad. Because it puts dollars over the human life, which I think is ethically wrong. So Iraq. Although they created all these lies, WMDs, human rights, blah, 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 the same thing they tell us every time, Iraq was a war for natural resources, particularly oil. Millions of people died in Iraq, and not only Iraqis, which is horrible, and their country was essentially destroyed, and now we've occupied them for years since. Thank you for the stickers. But, many American troops died too, and they come back with PTSD, and we don't take care of them. Right? So we're making millions of dollars off these wars. We're spending $700 billion plus on the military, but we can't pay for mental health treatment for our troops when they come back with PTSD. So it's all these tragic stories of human life being wiped out and being trampled on for economic expansion, for more money, for people, more money for people who have never seen war, who have never had to watch someone die, people sitting on top of the pyramid who sitting on top of generational wealth and lobbying the government to do these terrible wars for money. So human life, it's that Che Guevara quote. Thank you for the sticker. One human's life is more than all the riches of the wealthiest people in the world. I truly believe that. And I think it's only through capitalist brainwashing that we come to believe that material possessions and money are more important than human life. Like, that's not how humans are naturally supposed to think. That's the system we're born into. Thank you for the stickers. Was the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan a good thing? The Soviets stayed there for too long. They were probably too involved, but it's like one of those situations where you have the U.S. backing the Mujahideen and Osama bin Laden and all these extremist groups to try and get their interests done in Afghanistan. So you're the Soviet Union, you're the communist, world power, looking at the U.S. doing this, and it's like, well, shouldn't we help out our Marxist allies in Afghanistan? And that was the situation of the whole Cold War. So then you had all these messy proxy wars in which the Soviet Union and sometimes China were involved, and the U.S. was always involved, funding the most heinous extremist right-wing groups, whereas the Soviets and the Chinese were usually backing Marxist groups. And then you had bloody, brutal wars that happened with the backing of these two countries. It's like, yeah, I support the Marxist movements of those countries, but the Soviet Union, 30% of their budget, their government's budget, was military spending. So they were focusing, I think too little on improving the quality of life of their people as much as possible, and too much on military spending and trying to enact global revolution, essentially, by beating back the U.S. And obviously that, with the eventual collapse of the Soviet Union, their policy there sort of failed. Do you like Bob Dylan? Oh yeah. Thoughts on Jeremy Corbyn? Great labor leader. Huge Corbyn guy over here. How much do you know about Indonesia and the PKI? Not much. Sorry. Not anything, actually. Actually, I know about Indonesia in the U.S. coup of Sukarno that put Suharto in power. But that's it. Which was one of the first U.S. coups that kind of laid out the blueprint for what the U.S. would do for the rest of the Cold War. Thoughts on Hasanabi? He's good. Good for the left, I think. Obviously, me and Hassan probably don't agree on everything when it comes to Marxist theory, but he spreads Marxist theory to a very wide audience. So, thoughts on your mom? She's great. What do you think about Saddam Hussein? He stabilized Iraq, but it's he's one of those leaders where I don't even really have critical support, because he tortured his enemies and the CIA helped him rise to power. Although he called himself a socialist, and his economic policies, asking for higher oil quotas, was the reason the U.S. overthrew him. And Saddam had stabilized Iraq, whereas now Iraq is entirely destabilized. The U.S. has been there for 20 years fighting these extremist groups who are now battling for the power vacuum, for power in the vacuum that was left by Saddam after he was overthrown. So, hey, I live next door. Can you keep it down? Yeah, sorry. Iraq was better off with him, though. Yep. I mean, that's basically an indisputable fact, I just saw a live stream where a copper was driving and blasting, killing in the name of. That is ironic. Thoughts on the way the media portrays the DPRK. Everybody in this chat, after this live is over, I'm going to end fairly soon, go watch Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang on YouTube. The way that the U.S. lies about the DPRK and South Korea is insane. Thank you for the stickers. Like, it will blow your mind, and it will start to give you an idea of how the U.S. Manufactures propaganda about countries we want to destroy. That video changed my entire perspective. Was crazy. Yeah. I've got a lot of sources on the DPRK that I can give people, and I'm planning on doing a YouTube soon. But that movie, that short film, is like 40 minutes long, is the craziest. The best and the craziest. And the one that'll make you go, even, you know, I'm not saying you need to critically support the DPRK. I'm not saying you need to change all your views. But if you watch Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang, which I've been suggesting to a lot of younger socialists and communists that I'm mutuals with on this app, you will at least be questioning the stuff the U.S. has told you about the DPRK and every socialist experiment. You will at least be like, something's not right here. Have you read Juche? I haven't spent a lot of time reading it. I've spent a little bit, and like I know pretty well what it is. I've listened to a lot of speeches about it, but I haven't I don't have like Kim Il-sung's book. Should I? If you want to understand North Korean socialism better, I'm sure it'll help. Loyal citizens of Pyongyang are defectors who fled to South Korea. Fled. And that they were coerced into leaving their homes forever. And were tortured by the South Korean intelligence. It is insane. You got just watch that movie. It'll make you even more mad about the U.S. if you can answer that. Thoughts about Egypt's corrupt government? There are over 100,000 political prisoners. Yeah, I don't know about that, actually. I haven't been following Egypt. I know a little bit about the era with Nasser, and that there's a good debate with Nasser about, like, should socialists support nationalism, if it's an anti-imperialist nationalism. But I know nothing of modern Egypt, sadly. You can't keep up on everything, you know. Why is the left in the West not as radical as Europe? That's a very good question, my friend. A lot of it's cultural. A lot of it's, the way that our ruling class in America, our bourgeoisie, has been extremely successful at propagandizing the whole country, at infiltrating our highest educational institutions, on forming academia, on forming the media system. And when you grow up, believing one thing your whole life, it's really hard to overcome that and stop believing that. And that lie that the U.S. launders is that, one, socialism's never achieved anything, and socialism has just been garbage, and it's terrible, and it fails every time. And, the Red Scare, the idea that socialism could never work. It can and will never work, and it's a ridiculous thing to even try, and it'll make everybody equally poor. As under capitalism, 78% of our country lives paycheck to paycheck. And people are starting to wake up. Like, socialism is way more popular amongst younger people. Just the very fact that I exist, right? Not only the fact that we have, non-academics who are reading Marx and are preaching Marx, but the fact that I've been able to meet you guys, that I have this audience of awesome comrades, is proof that, like, socialism is becoming more popular because the contradictions of capitalism are playing themselves out more, right? Wealth inequality is going like this, imperialism is continuing, all these evils are continuing, and you can only lie to people for so long and be like, socialism's garbage, we need this system where there's more empty homes than there are homeless people while we spend $700 billion on the military. This is the only way it could work. Eventually people are going to be like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. Like, take that $700 billion in military and spend it on education. That's common sense. And that's socialism. So yeah, it's just a matter of reaching enough people. But yeah, the Red Scare has been extremely successful in the U.S. and people have been scared out of fighting for their own interests. Strategy-wise, there's ways to get around that, right? Like, we don't necessarily need to say bourgeoisie and proletariat and communism and Marxism. I do online, but if I'm talking to people, to try and destigmatize those words using my platform, but, talking person to person, all you got to say is, like, labor, or talk about unions, or talk about workers' rights, You can even mention class struggle. Like, a lot of people won't even know what that's from. So, thoughts on Putin? I did that earlier. I gave my thoughts on Putin. I'm not a big fan, so. So Socialist Countries doesn't have militaries, laughing emoji, clown emoji. No. So the idea is that you centralize power and you use the military rather for imperialist and capitalist expansion overseas to protect the revolution. Similar to what kind of happened in Bolivia, where the military was split. You know, the U.S. and the CIA backed this coup in Bolivia, and some of the military were on the side of the far-right Áñez Christian fundamentalist government in the U.S., but some of the military was loyal to the MAS in the revolution, and the workers were organized, and they armed themselves into militias, and they fought back against this, and now the Socialist Party is back in power, and Evo Morales has returned from exile to Bolivia. So it's using the military for a different purpose, right? Arming the proletariat and using them to protect themselves and to protect the revolution against the reactionaries and against the far right, versus using the military simply as a tool to expand economically overseas. China is the reason climate change will destroy your planet, but communism is eco-friendly. Actually, China, and you could definitely criticize them for carbon emissions. You know, they produce a lot of smog, and especially since they've industrialized, but, you know, that's been what's brought them out of poverty. But they're building these giant eco-cities, these sustainable cities that are just built different, right? They're engineered to produce less carbon emissions, to have more walking and biking areas rather than areas for cars. So we're sacrificing less public space to vehicles, and we're also producing less smog. And China has also built, you know, an insane high-speed rail system for public transport. So you can go basically anywhere you want in the snap of your fingers because you have this high-speed rail system, which is obviously much better for the environment than emitting carbon from cars and other gas-powered vehicles. And that's what you can do when you plan production, right? We can't plan what our oil company does right now, right? What all the U.S. oil companies do. That's decided by boards of people who are collecting insane profits from the sale of oil. But if our oil was controlled by the people, or the people controlling the state, rather than the Koch brothers, we could say, hey, we need to transition away from fossil fuels, otherwise we're going to destroy the planet and everyone's going to die. And that's been proved by, I bring up China, but like Bolivia is a great example in moving towards sustainability by nationalizing hydrocarbons, nationalizing their oil and gas industry. And yeah, they still have these industries and they still use them to power their country, and they use profit from these industries to fund social programs for their people, but they're beginning this transition to renewables, which is something the U.S. hasn't even really started to think about. You know, we mostly have green companies like BP being like, oh yeah, we'll move to sustainable energy soon, just trust us. It's like, yeah, okay, BP. Since you tweeted about it, I'm sure. Wasn't there a talk on TikTok about high-speed rail system in the U.S. except it would disrupt natives? Yeah. I mean, my thing, though, is like, yeah, we want to return land to the indigenous communities, right? And we're not saying build railroads right through their land. But right now, our roads and 4-lane highways and stuff not being built through indigenous land, or everything we have not being built on indigenous land. I'd rather have a high-speed rail system that goes around indigenous land, or if they want those jobs building the rail, if those communities agree, yes, we want high-speed rail coming through, that'll be good jobs for us, and we would like to have access to that transportation, obviously giving them sovereignty of their own land, which is the root of what Marxism and Hegelian philosophy is about, giving people the sovereignty to govern themselves. There's ways around it is what I'm saying. It's better than putting a 4-lane highway through their land without even asking, right? You could say, do you want this railway to go through here? It'll take you to New York and wherever else, and it'll employ a lot of people in the community. And if they say no, say, okay, we'll build it around here. You have sovereignty to this land. And if they say yes, be like, okay, now we have, our rail can go through this area and it'll be a great job creator for indigenous communities. So. Interest you has to be a bot. Oh, Sam's here. Sam, I'm going to make you a moderator so you can block people like that or mute them. Yeah, there are some ridiculous people who find my lives. The market can react. People starve under planned production. Holy cow. Who's going to tell this guy that 9 million people starve to death every year under global capitalism? That's weird that the market hasn't yet adjusted to feed everyone. 300, 400 years of capitalism now, and the market still hasn't adjusted to do that. We produce enough food to feed everyone, but for some reason the invisible hand can't seem to distribute enough food, but I'm sure it's the government's fault. Best economic books for socialism. I would say Wage, Labor, and Capital and Value, Price, and Profit are your best starters. Amazon union, please talk. Amazon crushed the union efforts, and there just wasn't enough organization. I kind of talked about this earlier. Like, it's just a sign that people don't yet see unions as the way to actually create better wages. There's been way too much anti-union propaganda, and we haven't had a strong union movement in this country for so long. Not to mention the left hardly even talks about unions anymore, which is bad and sad. So, yeah, no good. I wish they would have unionized. Political view on the Arab and Islamic world. My favorite Marxists that I've met so far since using this app are the ones from the Arab and Islamic world. They have such a great perspective. Their lived experience is absolutely invaluable. Islam is awesome. Yeah, I just love my Arab Marxist friends so much. Good morning, comrade. Good morning, Kyle. How do you guys feel about Arab and Islamic socialism and Marxists? Because I love them. You should start recording these lives and reposting to Instagram. Okay, I'll try and repost this one to my, because TikTok records them for us. I'll try and post this one to my YouTube, because this has been pretty interesting. Islam, Eddie, not Islam. Okay, Islam. And Muslim? Muslim. I am so bad at those names. Baathism. Yeah. They're all comrades to me. Based Islamic communism, definitely. Look at the correlation between middle class share of income versus union involvement rates. Yes, I've shared that graph before. It's like U.S. unions in the union membership in the U.S. goes like this around the 70s when we started to have neoliberalism, and more the 80s under Reagan, versus like 1% share of the income, and it goes like this, and then middle class share of the income goes like this along with unions. It's pretty crazy. But Fox News, if you search unions, like what are unions all about, you'll get like John Stossel Fox News videos, like actually unions are evil, and they'll don't allow for trickle-down economics, which are actually the best. Just trust us. Pretty sure my history teacher is a Marxist. He seems like he likes communism. That's cool. There's that one quote, like, if you study enough history, you must eventually become a Marxist or a liar. Would you rather fight Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk? Bezos, I guess. Israel or Palestine? That's not a question. The Israeli state is a murderous, like, sub-imperialist state, capitalist state, with much funding from the U.S., So I do believe that Jewish people have a right to their own sovereignty in their own state, but not in the way that it's being done now via settler colonialism and massacre. And 75% of Palestinian people are refugees. 75% of Palestinian people are refugees. I mean, if you don't think it's an illegal and murderous occupation, you're just not looking at it. I mean, communism equals no iPhone, Ben Shapiro, and Rave Dubin said so. Who's less intelligent, Rave Dubin or Ben Shapiro? I mean, I don't even think that's close. I think Ben is a lot smarter than Rave Dubin. But they're both goofballs. Thoughts on authoritative leftist ideologies? Read On Authority I think that's by Ingalls. Want to play COD? I would if I was good. My name is Chris. Did I call you Kyle? I'm so sorry, Chris. I know your last name. I won't say it on here because I don't want to dox you. But I love your content. I hope you don't take that personally. I talk to a lot of people, but I promise you are one of my actual favorites. I don't duet a lot of videos, but I did duet your video responding to Ben because it was great. Yeah. Sorry, no hard feelings. Is it worth spending time trying to radicalize liberals? Yeah. So I swear, there's been all this debate about, like, you shouldn't radicalize conservatives, right? And I get it, right? I'm not telling my comrades of color they need to go into reactionary areas and try and bring, reactionaries over to the left, put themselves in danger. Of course not. But me, as like a white communist, I do see it as a responsibility, right? To try and de-propagandize a lot of these conservatives, because a lot of them have been brainwashed into having these reactionary views. And you can bring them socialism and be like, no, your life is bad because of capitalism. It's not bad because of minorities. And I've been super successful in doing this. I've converted tons of people who formerly had slightly reactionary views to socialism and communism. Not outright racists, right? Not people who are like, I friggin' love Trump because of what he said about the border. Like, you have to recognize when people are TFGs, too far gone. But, so I've seen all this debate about radicalizing conservatives, and people are like, no, you shouldn't do it. And one of the top comments in one of these videos about radicalizing conservatives is like, yeah, and we shouldn't radicalize liberals either because, they're bad. And I'm like, okay. So I get in the U.S. like 40% of the country doesn't vote, and that's like a huge portion of the population that we should target. But if you're a socialist or a Marxist and you're saying we shouldn't target liberals or Republicans, it's like, then who are you targeting? Like I said, you're only going to target the 40 people who don't vote? Like, anyone who labels themselves as a Democrat or a Republican, you can't talk to about socialism? Which is, I just don't feel like a lot of people got into this stuff for the same reason as me, right? Like, the reason I think, like, we need to spread socialism and Marxism to everyone, right? And pull people away from reactionary views and move them towards socialism so we can move society forward, attack these reactionary ideas that have existed in the U.S. forever, and then bring people up out of poverty economically. And that's what I feel like everyone should eventually believe. So that's what I try and spread to people. But for some people at this point, which is odd to me, I feel like Marxism and communism has become like a social group, right? Like, we just need to create as much of like a safe space as we can where nobody hears anything that ever makes them angry. If anyone says anything that makes us angry, they're out of the group forever. We excommunicate them. And I just don't understand that. I'm like, isn't the goal of philosophy, a revolutionary philosophy and Marxism, to bring it to the masses? I mean, if you read anybody who successfully, implemented any kind of socialism, Ho Chi Minh, Vladimir Lenin, Mao Zedong, or Marx and Engels themselves, what they say is you need to bring this to the workers and make it easily understandable to the workers. And if you look at the workers in Russia before the Soviet Union was established, they were far more reactionary than U.S. workers today. They had these ridiculous ideas about patriarchy and other things. But they eventually, created the USSR, which had explicit anti-racism in their constitution, right? Like, you go to jail for being racist. In the Soviet Union, if they had someone like Derek Chauvin, there wouldn't be a trial. He goes probably to a hard labor camp. And I'm not saying that's what we need to implement today, but I'm saying they built this reactionary, patriarchal country into a socialist country, that was moving towards human rights and full employment and abolishing illiteracy and housing everyone. And I don't see why we can't do that in the U.S., but if you're totally writing off all liberals and all conservatives, it's like, who are you bringing the revolutionary philosophy to then? Who are you talking to other than people within your social group? Which is fine, if that's what you want to do or if that's what it is for you. I'm not saying everybody has to hit the streets and bring this philosophy to everyone. But, like, that's my goal. And, like, don't hate on me for trying to bring people over. Sorry, I didn't read the comments during that whole thing. I bet some people had some good... We should be radicalizing anyone who will listen. I agree. Chris. Is voting worthwhile? Yes. Especially in the 21st century. Revolutionary reform, revolution, but I still believe in voting. Like, you can have nonviolent revolution. I just believe that we need to move to full socialism if we're going to abolish imperialism and the other evils and contradictions of capitalism. My friend asked how she should become a leftist. How do I respond? Show her my YouTube channel. Maybe. I don't know. Show her Hakeem's YouTube channel. Show her anyone's YouTube channel. I don't know. Do you like Stalin? I've actually never met him. But he's ignoring me. I'm not trying to. I'm sorry. Let me see the last thing you said, Fat Rooster. Or just leave your comment again, and I'll try not to ignore it. R.I.P. DMX. I know. I know. Advice on learning without literature. Got friends with learning difficulties. Yeah, that's one of the main goals of our project is I do these breakdowns of different books, trying to explain them and give like an abridged summary of them. So I have State and Rev and Imperialism on my YouTube, Midwestern Marks, which is pretty much designed for people who struggle reading, long literature. But there's tons of stuff. Richard Wolff, Why Marx Was Right is a good book by Terry Eagleton. Hakeem, Base Black Communist on here is one of my favorites who explains theory on TikTok. So, R.I.P. DMX, I know. Where's that fat rooster guy? I'm trying to answer your question, buddy. That Che clock, though. Yeah, I got that for my birthday. It's so dope. Che is with me always. R.I.P. DMX. I know. Oh, sorry. I was rereading an old comment. DemSoc is possible in the global south, for sure. Via the unions. It'd be possible here, too. We rely on voting for change. We need to get money out of politics. Definitely. Yeah, I'm not saying rely on voting for change. I'm saying voting is a worthy battle to fight, right? So, we need economic organization. We need the workers organized into communist and socialist organizations for learning and educating themselves and becoming class conscious, and then also organizing themselves into unions so they can actually fight back and actually demand that the state do things. But at the same time as we're fighting those battles, we need to, run politicians to try and control the state as much as we can. And also be prepared for the capitalist class to violently crack down on us and to defend ourselves. Thoughts on farmers' protests in India? Ooh, I have a couple videos on that. Yeah, it's great. Class consciousness, workers fighting back against neoliberalism and against Narendra Modi, who has violently suppressed the protests and has moved towards neoliberalism. He rose as kind of a pro-worker candidate. He wanted to be somewhere in the middle, I have my kind of bigoted, nationalistic, Hindutva, pro-Hindu views, which is what Modi's all about, but also I'm going to protect the workers. And then the U.S. has pressured him to be no, you need to crack down on the workers so we can keep exploiting you for cheap resources. And it backfired hard. The protests are nope, we're done with you, Modi. So it's pretty cool. The farmers are awesome. Thoughts on liberation theology? Love it. Eddie, you should use the auto caption generator for this app. It's really good for your videos. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. I have it. You have to download the videos then and then re-upload them. So if I'm stitching someone, that kind of ruins the stitch feature, which I stitch a lot of people, but I'll try and keep that in mind on my just straight up educational videos. So, your favorite current leader in the world outside of Evo? Oh, I was gonna say probably Evo, but favorite leader anywhere in the world? That's a tough one. The trade unionist leaders in general in Bolivia and in Venezuela are awesome. The leaders on the ground in Venezuela are great. You can critique the Venezuelan state for sure. There's definitely corruption and cases where they've overstepped their power to do, kind of crackdowns on the left in Venezuela, the Communist Party, who's left of the Socialist Party. I was just talking about this with a buddy, actually, and how we should talk about this issue in America, right? Where there's critique of the Venezuelan government from the left, but if you say that in America, people are going to be oh, so that means we should overthrow the Venezuelan government and put Guaido in power. It's no, even the Communist Party in Venezuela who critiques the state, they still vote for Maduro instead of Guaido. But there is this critique of the government to the left. So I love those leaders in Venezuela, the people on the ground, the grassroots leaders. And I read interviews with them all the time on VenezuelaAnalysis.com. And they're so intelligent and they understand the material conditions of their country so well. And it's just something we should strive for in the U.S. So any grassroots leader on the ground, I guess, rather than looking to these heads of state, the Xi Jinpings, the Castro types, even though I do admire Fidel Castro a lot. The Un family, or the Kim's family. I've lost about 100 followers because I said conservatives are easier to radicalize than libs. Yeah, I don't understand the whole, people who don't think cancel culture is a thing. I'm Are you paying attention? Are you involved in any online leftist circles? Like, people are always trying to cancel each other. Like, you have one take that people disagree with, and they're like, this is racist. I'm going to unfollow you. It's like, clearly you're a good person who's fighting for socialism and Marxism, and you're not telling your comrades of color that they need to go into reactionary circles and put themselves at risk. You're just saying, like, I convert a lot of conservatives to Marxism, and like, somewhere along the line, people on the left started labeling that as a bad thing. It's like, no, you're supposed to convert people to Marxism. That's the whole point. The echo chamber is real. It is. It is. Yeah. Violent revolution or gradual reform depends on the place. In the U.S., we need not gradual reform, but we need, we're not going to just overthrow the government if we, get enough guns and enough class consciousness. It's going to need to be economic organization on the ground, unionization, also running people out of the unions and running people out of the Communist Party. But at the U.S. at this point, the parties aren't useless. The parties do a lot of good work in mutual aid, but the Communist Party is 5,000 members, and DSA has 100,000, and they've won a few people to office, But there's no powerful Communist Party in the U.S. yet, and the conditions aren't right to even have one yet, is what I'm trying to say. We need more class consciousness and more organization of workers. All right, everyone, I think I'm going to go finish reading my Evo Morales book. Thank you for hanging out with me on my birthday. Thank you for everyone who sent stickers and served as a moderator. Much love. Peace. Oh, sorry. Never mind. All right, I'm out.